Engaged Employee Podcast is brought to you by the Patterns of Possibility, where we help people make more meaningful relationships in both their personal and professional life. Hi, I'm Coach Lee Hopkins. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I want to welcome you to the Engaged Employee Podcast. Our mission is to emphasize the relationship between the employee and the workplace with the goal of enhancing engagement levels to create a more productive and satisfying work environment. While many organizations strive to create a more engaging atmosphere, they often miss the mark by forcing connection with big team building events like axe throwing or escape rooms. Those activities only leave employees with a short-lived sense of belonging. Organizations may also try smaller and more suffocating events like happy hours or group birthday celebrations that their employees feel obligated to attend. As a social connections and business culture coach, I found that to create a stable, engaged, and productive workforce, there needs to be a shift in focus from mandatory fun and manufactured connection towards building trust and authentic conversation. Join me and a guest as we dive into social wellness strategies for the individual employee, techniques for developing interpersonal relationships with coworkers, and even some approaches for leaders to enrich the overall organizational culture. The Engaged Employee Podcast starts now. Hi, my name's Coach Lee Hopkins, and my guest today is Tiffany Slowinski. Tiffany is a seasoned entrepreneur and co-owner of two thriving franchises with her husband, Jake. Drawing inspiration from family life and a successful professional career, Tiffany leads Team Spark Advisors, which is a diagnostic tool for team insights helping to improve communication and heighten productivity. She is committed to helping businesses and leaders achieve their goals by fostering purpose-driven cultures and delivering exceptional results. Our conversation today will be focused on interpersonal relationships between coworkers and colleagues. Tiffany, welcome to the Engaged Employee Podcast.
Hi, Coach Lee. Thanks for having me.
Oh, so such a treat to have you here today. I love this because you talk about data, and in my former life, and when I worked in corporate, I worked in data. So I'm really interested. Now I'm working with personal relationships, and so I am interested in learning how you create those relationships through data. So can you tell us a little bit about how you got started in this, why it's important to you?
Yeah. So to kind of go back in my history, I'm the opposite of you. I started off working with people. I went to Columbia University and received my master's in counseling and was actually a guidance counselor for 13 years.
Oh,
From there, left and got into sales and eventually was leading a sales team nationally. I was a VP of sales. And what I was finding was with our sales team, we'd have some people come in, they're just amazing. It's so natural for them. They're killing it. And we have some people who come in who are the nicest people in the world, where everything on paper looks right. And yet they just weren't successful in that role. It wasn't for them. And so in that role, I started using this diagnostic tool, the culture index, and I was able to see really quickly who our top performers are and what they had in common with each other. So it wasn't that they were all clones of each other where they all seemed the same. You would line up our top 20 performers and wouldn't think they were all that similar in nature. And yet, when we were able to use this diagnostic tool and dive in, they had certain characteristics that were very similar to each other, despite the rest of their personality being
hmm.
different. And from there, we were able to really hone in on who we were looking for in the position and then how to best motivate them to be successful.
Yeah, that's really interesting because I do believe that there's a certain set of skills that you need for any kind of position that you're in. But I hear you saying that their personalities were completely different, but they had the skill set and you're able to hone in on the skill set. Is
Yeah.
that right? Okay, yeah. So, as we talk about interpersonal relationships and connections with our employees and our coworkers, I'd be curious to know. So now you understand the skill set, but how is it that you get these people who have a skill set, but perhaps they don't have the interpersonal connection that you need for a team to thrive. No matter how well you can do the thing, if you can't get along with your teammates, as I discovered, you're not going to have a great time. It's not going to be productive.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've worked with lots of businesses and I'll always ask, how important is the skill? So, depending, I mean, if you're working with a hospital, the skill of a doctor, yes, that matters a ton. They have to go to med school, they have to understand 7 years worth of information, or I don't even know how long you go to med school for, but a long time. But with a lot of positions, when I really get down to it and I talk to a CEO and I'm saying, or I'm asking, how much skill is necessary? Most of the time, they're like, oh, the business knowledge that you need for this company is kind of minimal. It's not rocket science a lot of times. These are things people can learn quickly. So in those environments, we can very quickly look at what's the personality of the person we're looking for that's going to be successful in the position. And then, of course, looking at that skill, that resume, their background, that plays into it too. But often that's the easy piece, depending again on the industry, for them to learn. They can learn those skills, but if they don't have the right personality for the position, it doesn't matter what kind of background knowledge you have, it's going to be difficult to be successful. And so I look at myself, for example, I got into sales at 35 years old without one day of experience and immediately hit it out of the park with no background knowledge, no skills, no training, because I had the personality of a person who was going to excel in a sales role. And so I learned those skills really quickly. I could overcome the years of experience that other people had. Now, when we're looking at teams, we need to realize, who are we looking for in those specific positions? And a position in one company can look very different than another. Is this B2B sales? Is this B2C? What type of other people are in that organization? You want people who are going to be able to get along. So the first thing I do is I use my diagnostic tool to look at the current culture. Who's already there? How are they performing? Are they doing well in that position? And then the next piece is, how can we better communicate with them? Is there any shuffling? Sometimes it's a very small change. Changing somebody's seat in an office can make all the difference if they're going to be productive or not, because they might be a person who needs quiet and space and ability to think. Other people, they want to be right next to that water cooler. They're social. They want to chat. That's how they get their energy out. And so understanding those things can make that difference of where you're putting somebody and understanding that group dynamic. And now, of course, as we're bringing new people into that equation, we want to find the people that are going to fit into those roles within your structure.
I find it interesting that what caught my interest, the peak that piqued my interest, was that seating can be a big difference between, how you can interact with another person. So how is the culture overall? Now, something that happened when I was working in corporate was that we had these double high cubicles and people couldn't see over them. And then somebody above us decided that that was no longer going to be the culture, and they chopped them down so now we can see everybody who's walking by. And I tell you, for me, as a person who just wanted to focus on my machine and focus on my computer and my work, I found that completely distracting. I found it very distracting and hard to adjust, and I was just kind of thrown into it. I think other people were thrown into that too. They didn't have a choice to that. But this is something that I understand, that with your diagnostic tool, you kind of look at these variables that we don't really think about and consider how a person might thrive or might struggle in this kind of environment.
Yeah. So that's a great example of like how high you make their office walls, right? Now
Hmm.
think about currently, how many people are working from home? Well, our research shows our super social people, they have a harder time working from home. They miss humans. So what will they do when they get on a phone call or a Zoom call? Spend twice the amount of time they need to, because they want to connect and they want to talk,
Hmm.
or they'll leave their house. They'll find excuses to run errands. And I'm a super social person. I will go get a cup of coffee just to literally leave my house. Those of you who can see me on camera here,
Yeah.
I work from home, right? I need to leave my house to be around other people. Now, flip side, in office setting, like you're saying, where you just want to concentrate, some of our lower social people, they work so much better at home because there's nobody chattering and annoying them, or
Yeah.
annoying them, distracting them. We're
Distracting.
going to die. So even figuring out who's maybe good for a work from home model versus an in office versus a hybrid are things that we can look at and let the data support it. Because on a job interview, if I want to get that job, I'm going to say, I work great from home by myself. Oh, it's so fantastic. I'm really good at controlling my time. And that may or may not be true.
Okay, so the understanding of yourself more so than what you to it's going to help you understand what you want out of a work environment. So I understand what I hear, but your diagnostic tool is that you're doing a diagnosis of the environment, but are you doing a diagnosis of the person who's going into the environment too?
Yeah, I'm doing it all the way around. So, yes, I'm looking at who's already there, who's the manager, who are they reporting to? But then I'm also figuring out an avatar for who do we want to come into this environment? Who's going to fit well into the existing structure and perform well in that particular position? An
Mm,
example, an administrative assistant. That person can look completely different depending on the company. So, somebody who's interested in becoming an administrative assistant might go online, they find a position, oh, this is near my house, perfect, and apply. But that role can look completely different depending on who they're reporting to, what the actual day to day of that position looks like, what's expected of them. And but depending on what's expected of them and who they're reporting to, the personality type of the person you want to bring in can be different. Is this somebody who needs to work with customers and be out there and be forward facing? Or is this somebody who really needs to get into the nitty gritty, be highly detail oriented, be in the grind? And who's going to communicate well with the boss? So that can look completely different, the same job description. So what I really do is I come in and I help companies figure out what are they looking for. And a lot of times they don't even realize what they're looking for. They're not quite sure. Well, I just want an assistant, somebody to do stuff for me, right? Well, but who's going to excel in that position with your personality? Because who's going to work well with me is different than you, Coach Lee. We are different people. We have different needs. We're going to communicate differently. And by identifying exactly what we need in that position and who we're looking for, we're able to bring the best person into that environment that's going to thrive. They're going to be happy. There's going to be less turnover. They're going to be successful. Now, this is just, it's a piece of the equation, right? I don't want anybody to think I'm taking the human element, throwing it out the windows. I've had many recruiters say, this is what I do for a living. This is what I spot. Sure, your instinct comes into it. You have to interview somebody and pick up on those final little nuances of someone and whether or not you want to work with them. But the data, when it's put in front of you, it's hard to ignore it. If you need someone who's going to be highly patient and detail oriented to come in and work on very methodical tasks, and you're looking at the data and it's saying this person's a total nonconformist who can't show up on time and is going to throw rules out the window. And hey, I'm one of them, right? You don't want me to
mhm.
be your admin.
Yeah. I'm going to be questioning everything that you tell me that you want me to do. I'm gonna give you the worst time. I'm gonna give you the worst time with your job, and I don't care if I get fired. No, you don't want that kind of person because it takes time, effort, and energy to find them in the first place. So I really like this idea of using this tool. If we could just zoom in a little more to the interpersonal relationships, like looking at the individual who's trying to connect with their coworker. Is there a way that we could use this tool to perhaps for me to understand more about my coworker and how I could possibly interact with them? Because say I'm one of those people who is not very social, and here comes a very social person, or I'm stuck on a very social team and I don't know what to do. What would you say to one of those people?
So that's part of what I do. I come in and I work with the organization and I help people understand each other. So some of it is surveying and getting that data, but then it's teaching everybody on the team how to look at that data, how to utilize it. And so we start to communicate differently. In working with my own husband, we're business partners. He will say to me at times now, Tiffany, I'm low social. I don't want to go to that event. And it's hard for me to dispute it. And have I always known he's low social? Yes, I married the man. I know he doesn't like to leave the house. That's not lost on me. But somehow when he presents it in that way now, I go, you're right. Maybe you could sit this one out because he's saying things like, I have to recharge and you're distracting me by making me go to another party. I'm not going to enjoy myself. You're not going to enjoy yourself by having me there being crabby. So it's just an ability to understand each other better. At the same time, another piece of our personalities are very different is I am as impatient as they come. I literally fall in the bottom 1% of humans on earth in patience. And again, I always knew I was impatient. Did I know I was bottom 1% of all humans walking the earth? No, it's so extreme. Whereas my husband's patient. There's a time and place for both of us, right? So now he can say to me, Tiffany, that's your impatience. You have to slow down. You are wearing out our employees. They don't like working with you. And I'm like, okay, you're right. I have that knowledge now. Whereas before, my go to would be to say, well, they should just work faster. I'm not understanding why they can't keep up. Are they really trying? Do they really care? And to have this understanding that I just work faster than everybody else makes me modify that down to be more patient with others. So there's absolutely ways when we understand each other, we can communicate different. If you know that person, I know the intro to your show said, oh, the dreaded cocktail hour,
Yeah.
or you're going to an escape room. And I'm like, sign me up. That's the company I want to work at, because I'm the person who likes to go to the cocktail hour, and I will bulldoze over the people who don't, because I couldn't see them before. Now I understand that. And you can't make those things mandatory. And something as simple as like, hey, sometimes we do a cocktail hour for the people like that. Sometimes we just do a little lunch. Sometimes we just skip the whole thing and send an email, right? There's different things where you can fill different people's cups when you understand what's there.
Wow, very well said. I chuckled a whole lot when you said bottom 1%. I was bottom 1% of being patient. That's wild. And it is very powerful to know that, so that you can connect and communicate with other people, so you can hone in on that and really tell them what it is that you need from them, or they know how you're going to behave, and you can understand each other and not, get mad at each other or get frustrated in that space. And so I really appreciate that you have this data to really, show that this is how I'm going to show up. It's not just because I don't want to do something different. The data proves that this is how I am, and we can respect that. We can respect that. So I loved everything that you said here, and we're running out of time. So I want to be sure that my listeners can find you. Can you tell them about what's going on with you, what's new with you? Where can they find you? What are you working on?
Yeah. So the best place to find me is teamsparkadvisors.com. I have a link up there to my tool. It will take you 7 minutes to take this survey. The information is extremely helpful to you. And it's way easier for me to show you what I do than try to explain it. So I really say, go onto my website, teamsparkadvisors.com, take my survey that I have on there. Insights are very valuable, but that's where we can start, by taking a look at ourselves first. And then the next step, let's take a look at our teams. Let's take a look at the other people we're working with, because your mind will be blown when you see who you are. But at your core, you kind of know who you are already, right? Where it really triggers it is when we start to survey other people on your team, and you're like, wow, I always saw that, but I didn't really understand why. Or I can be so much more empathetic now, or work better with that person now that I understand why. And business owners, CEOs, VPs of sales, reach out to me, go on there, take that survey, because I can really show you who your team is and how to get the most out of them.
That is wonderful. I have taken the survey too. It is really comprehensive, and it is very, very helpful for you to understand more about who you are. It's really fantastic. Tiffany, I want to thank you so much for sharing that with us and sharing this link with us. I'll have all the stuff available for you in the show notes. Teamsparkadvisors.com. Go ahead and check that out, and definitely check out that profile. Take that profile, take that assessment of yourself. Tiffany, thanks again for coming on. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Coach Lee.
All right. Do you want meaningful relationships in 2024? Then become. And there you have it. Another insightful episode of the Engaged Employee Podcast. We hope you enjoyed the deep dive into the world of employee engagement, leadership, and workplace dynamics. The Engaged Employee Podcast is brought to you by the Patterns of Possibility, where we help people make more meaningful relationships in both their personal and professional life. Before we wrap up, we want to extend our heartfelt gratitude to our incredible guests and, of course, our loyal listeners. Your support keeps us motivated to bring you valuable content each week. If you found today's discussion thought-provoking and want to learn more about how we can help you or your organization make more meaningful relationships, go to patternsofpossibility.com and book a friendly conversation with me. Or you can email me your questions at patternsofpossibility@gmail.com. Stay connected with us and engage with fellow listeners by following the Patterns of Possibility on LinkedIn. You can also catch us on YouTube. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring that notification bell to stay in the loop. And if you prefer the audio version, make sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Your support means the world to us, and by subscribing, you'll never miss an episode. Thank you for being a part of our journey to create workplaces where passion meets productivity. Until next time, I'm Coach Lee. Stay engaged, stay inspired.